when we dealt with or proposed amendment to the Constitution, we are sitting as a constituent assembly.
The House of Representatives has restarted discussions on charter change after a year-long break.
That's strange to me because no committee of the Senate or of the House, including the Committee on Constitutional Amendments, can sit as a constituent assembly because the Constituent Assembly is composed of members of the House and of the Senate in a joint meeting or assembly.
There's no doubt that we need to amend or change our Constitution in order to clarify all those ambiguous provisions that we can find in our our Constitution. But right now, to pursue this charter change is, I think, not prudent, it's not timely, and it's not responsive to the current needs of the Filipino people.
With all due respect to our well-meaning congressmen and senators, pag po kasi ang mga members of Congress ang kumalikot sa silito, lagi po may suspect o merong pagdududa, teka muna, lalo pat gagalawin mo sa panahon na next year election na.
Some lawmakers want to lift the Constitution's restrictive economic provisions on foreign participation in the economy to generate investments during this pandemic. But some economists and critics caution against the timing of the deliberations as government struggles in its COVID vaccination plans.
They are also asking questions. Why does Congress want charter change a year before the start of the campaign period for the 2022 presidential elections? We discuss all of that in this episode of The Chiefs.
Welcome to this Wednesday edition of The Chiefs. And of course, with us tonight on set is Robbie Alampay of One News. Hi, Robbie. And also with us online are Ana Marie Pamintuan of the Philippine Star from the port area in Manila. And of course, Lucy Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and happy midweek.
Hello.
Hi, Robbie.
I don't know if it's a really happy midweek.
We have,
story just came in.
Medyo malaki. I mean, it's not a surprise. We've all been bracing for this, but now confirmation just a few minutes ago that we have a confirmed case of the British variant of COVID-19 here in the Philippines. Medyo hindi pa gano'ng karaming details, but this involves a man who arrived from the United Arab Emirates in January 7. He's a resident of Quezon City. He also had a companion with him who is negative for any kind of COVID, but so far that's all we know.
Yeah, we're talking about the B117, the UK variant that is supposed to be 70% more transmissible than the variant that we have in the Philippines. Just to add to the details that you gave, the man left the Philippines on December 27 to go to the UAE for business, came back on January 7, and he has tested positive under genome sequencing with the B117, but his partner did not test positive at all. So at least as far as we know, there is no indication yet of local transmission that we know of as yet. So I suppose that last part is of significance na wala pa tayong nakikitang so far local transmission.
But it seems that he also tested negative in Dubai. So you wonder where he might have gotten that, no? So medyo strange yun. Pero really, no, tama ka, Robbie, ang reaction ng lahat, well, you know, it's just a matter of time, right? Parang ganon, no? It's almost like it's unavoidable.
Pero
it's a sad thing.
Ang makikita natin dito ay siring mahalaga is one other detail is they are saying there's no, as far as they can tell, there is no travel outside of Quezon City for this man.
Yes.
Pero nag-start na ang contact tracing. And I don't know how much of a sample you can make of one man, but the contact tracing, obviously, they want to see whether or not the fact na mas nakakahawa supposedly itong variant na to, if that can manifest that.
I suppose he is still under quarantine.
Yes, he still is.
When he arrived
Yes,
here,
he
he's
is.
supposed to be under 14-day quarantine.
That's right.
So if he arrived on the 7th, he should be there until the 21st
Yes.
in quarantine. So that should limit his well, his activities outside of his quarantine area, assuming that all the steps are followed. Anyway, so that's a big story for tonight. But now we go into our primary topic for tonight, which is the dance of Cha-Cha. The House Committee on Constitutional Amendments today began, or resumed, I would rather say, resumed deliberations on charter change, specifically the economic provisions of the Constitution. And so joining us tonight is our first guest, the chairman of the House Committee on Constitutional Amendments, Chairman Alfredo Garbin Jr. Sir, thank you for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Thank you, Ed, Ravi, Lucy, and Ami, and thank you very much for having me
Good evening.
here.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. I think it
Gandang
came
gabi
as a
po.
surprise, sir, to a lot of people when you announced during the committee hearing that what you already have ongoing with the committee is a constituent assembly. I think that did raise quite a number of eyebrows. However, I looked up the Constitution again. I do acknowledge that the Constitution does not even set a process.
Name.
Does not even set a
Yes.
process or use the phrase constituent assembly.
Exactly,
It just says
yes.
3/4 vote by Congress, of course, to be ratified by the general voting population. So there we have it. We don't want to go into a semantics debate, but I think the primary question for a lot of people is what is the process that you are looking at for this particular process of amendments? Who is going to define the process and what is the process that we are looking at?
Well, Ed, the Constitution granted the Congress the power to determine its own rules in proposing amendment to the Constitution. And the Constitution does not provide for the convening of a Constituent Assembly prior to making a proposal or amendments to the Constitution. In fact, neither there is any mention of about the Constituent Assembly in the rules of the House of Representatives. So
yeah.
my stand there is that once Congress initiates, when we say initiate, it starts with the committee. Once Congress initiates the procedure to propose amendments to the Constitution through Article 17, it is deemed to have entered into the exercise of its constituent powers. There is no need for a prior act of organizing itself as a body exercising constituent powers. Makikipagpustahan ako kung may makikita tayo sa Constitution na nagsasabi that we have to convene as a constituent assembly. In fact,
Well, I think, sir, we all agree on that.
but-
A quick look at the Constitution would state that na wala ngang ganong process dun sa Constitution. But sir,
kaya nga
yes, sir.
nagtataka ako kung bakit yung ating mga magagaling na kongresista at senador ay nagtataka rin sa mga sinabi ko. In fact, let me quote Father Bernas when he was asked the question, how does Congress become or convert into a constituent assembly? Ang sabi ni Father Bernas, which is an eminent constitutionalist and a member of the Constitutional Commission in the 1987 Constitution, sabi niya, I suggest that that is the wrong question. A constituent assembly is a body authorized by the Constitution to propose amendments or revisions. So, Congress is already authorized under Article 17 to propose amendments or revision. In other words, the Constitution has made Congress both as an ordinary legislative body through Article 6 and as a constituent body through Article 17 of the Constitution.
Yeah, sir,
So
but if you don't mind, we keep saying Congress, and that is accurate, but that is also part of the problem, is it not? I mean, because even the definition of Congress has always been, every time there's talk about constituent assembly or a constituent process, every time there's talk about Cha-Cha, the basic question between the two houses of Congress is, when is it initiated? And what about the Senate here? Is it the Senate part of having to trigger that process?
that's why, Rabi, we have our own rules and we were granted by the Constitution to determine our own rules in proposing amendments to the Constitution. And under our own rules, it says that by a resolution of both houses of Congress exercising its constituent power may propose amendment to the Constitution by a vote of 3/4 of all its members voting separately. So malinaw naman bakit tayo nagtatalo dito. Ang pagtalunan siguro dapat whether voting separately or jointly. Yun kasi ang requirement na nakasaad sa ating konstitusyon. Yun lang ang minensyon ng konstitusyon. 3/4 vote of all members of Congress. It does not speak of convening Congress as a constituent assembly.
So under your proposal, Congressman, voting separately, kasi in the past, marami na, almost every administration nagkakaroon ng ganitong movement. In fact, merong ganito ring proposal during the time of Speaker Belmonte and Senate President Enrile. Ganyan lang, mas simple nga yung kanila. How is it different now? Saka, sa tingin nyo ba magko-cooperate sa inyo Senate at this point?
When the Speaker authored RBH 2, it is expressly stated therein in the resolved area that we will vote separately. So, malinaw po. Yung agam-agam ng Senado na lulusawin namin sila sa pamamaraan ng isang joint voting, ay hindi ho dahil expressly stated in the said resolution that we will vote separately. Meaning, we are giving the Senate as a equal part of Congress having the power also to propose amendments to the Constitution.
So sa proseso po ninyo, kung ituloy nyo yan at yung Senado ay hindi naman kumilos, wala ring mangyayari. Ganun po ba yun?
Tama ho, Ma'am Duchi, kasi kaya nga ho tsa-tsa eh. Sa tsa-tsa dapat may kapartner ka eh. And therefore, the Senate should actively participate in all the deliberation. Otherwise, if the Senate will not actively participate, we having a bicameral Congress, wala rin mangyayari po dito. That's why we call upon our counterpart in the Senate to have an open mind. This is needed by our nation. This is for the best interest of our nation and for the best interest of the Filipino people. We have a 33-year-old constitution. It's never been amended. It's because very restrictive, very tedious. And when you speak about the timing, we speak about it is always the right time to do the right thing. Palagi na lang argumento. Pag nagpo-propose tayong amendment sa Constitution, hahaluan ng political provision. Now, the Speaker is very sincere. The product that we have approved or we will approve and the product that we will transmit to the Senate will all be exclusively for the restrictive economic provision. Walang halong
Yes, sir.
politika.
But, sir, I'd like to go back to my earlier question about the process involved here. We are talking about the process. Whatever you call it, it still is a process. So, are we looking at the same process as that of the passage of a bill or a law? Will it go through, of course, your committee first, and then it will be you'll take a vote in the committee level and elevate it to the plenary for a vote of 3/4 by your chamber separately from that of the Senate?
Well, tama po, Ed. Ang sabi ng ating internal rules ng Committee on Constitutional Amendments, by exercising our constituent power, we will treat this as an ordinary bill that will undergo the ordinary processes of legislation, meaning it will undergo first reading, which we are doing now in the committee, referred to the committee, second reading in the plenary, period of debate and interpellation, and third reading, the period of voting where we will muster the 3/4 vote of all members voting separately.
Okay, so
If
sir,
that is
in
your
a worst case scenario, if you were to lay that down in a calendar, just so alam ng mga tao, beyond the steps, people want to picture the calendar for 2021 in your most optimistic projection. Where does that put us, and when do you think there will be some resolution on this question?
Well, Rabi, the Speaker intended to finish this before the Christmas break. Kung mas maaga pa, mas mabuti para mai-transmit na namin ito sa Senado. However, we have the issue on it could not be scheduled for a plebiscite not earlier than 60 days nor later than 90 days. And so, the Speaker would want to schedule this sabay sa 2022 national election para mas economical sa ating mga kababayan at sa ating gobyerno. Hindi na maggastos. And at the same time, it will be a sort of information drive sa ating mga kababayan para ikampanya natin kasi at the end of the day, sila naman ang magraratifika ng ating konstitusyon.
How imperative is it that you change these quote-unquote restrictive economic provisions, that you have to do it at a time when we're having to deal with a pandemic, and also at a time when we're approaching election season, and people are just really incredulous at the fact that you would, to use their words, no, parang barefaced, push something that could very well benefit you, who will run in the next elections. How do you quell that suspicion? There's vested interest motivations behind this.
First of all, Lucy, the proposal is limited to economic provisions, and therefore there will be no provisions, political provisions that will be tackled. No politicians, no members of Congress will benefit from it, except that the interests of the country and of the Filipino people. Second, as to the timing, we always say, sama naman ang timing. But I also say that it is always the right time to do the right thing. We have a 33-year-old constitution. And when you speak of a 33-year-old constitution, it was crafted by the framers of the constitution. They did not say na this will likely to answer for the needs of the future. And in fact, what we are seeing now is that this restrictive economic provision, as presented to us by the business groups, those players in the national patrimony, and the OECD study, the World Bank, are showing that these incentives to our foreign direct investment, it hampers the flow of foreign capital to our country. Kanina, there were 3 UP professors, the best UP economic professors, were all saying that it's high time, it's the right time to amend the Constitution by lifting this restrictive economic provision. This is also a pandemic response caused about by the problems of the pandemic in our economy. Bagsak yung ating ekonomiya, walang trabaho, yung iba, maraming nagsara. And therefore, the best way is really to have a business climate that will entice foreign direct investment to come to our country and invest in our country. Alisin na natin yung notion na magpapaalipin tayo sa namumuno ng dayuhan. Ang totoo naman, yung OFW natin nagpapaalipin sa ibang bansa. Dito sila mamuhunan.
Congressman, ano po yung, we'll get into all of that later on, no? The content and the proposals and so on. But people are still on the level of, how can you guarantee that? How can you assure us na,
Yes.
I mean, yan ang plano ng committee nyo. Yan ang ihaay nyo, economic provisions lang. But really, how can you speak for all the congressmen and all the senators and say that nobody else will have any other suggestions here? Nobody else will discuss anything political here?
Ang sabi na ating speaker, and I took his word as a word of honor, that what we will approve and what we will tackle in the plenary is exclusively for restrictive economic provisions. Yun ang ipapasa natin. And I take his word for that. So yun po. And that's why hinikayat namin ang taong bayan to participate in the public discussion and debate.
Yeah, but Congressman,
Yeah,
you understand
pero
where the
pag
question
bumoto kayo
is. Congressman, you understand where the question is coming from. Every time we open a can of worms, any can of worms, in the House of Representatives and in Congress, in either house, hindi mo alam saan mapupunta. I mean, just as an example, yung ABS-CBN prangkisa, ang pag-uusapan doon, prangkisa. Ang pag-uusapan doon, yung regulatory bodies, yung BIR, SEC, NTC, and so on. Anong kinatapusan? Oligarkiya. I mean, it's just not to bring that up, but people, frankly, do not trust Congress to limit its discussions to what you're saying. The word of the speaker, whoever speaker is there, notwithstanding, it's just a very pragmatic, very real question. Wouldn't you at least acknowledge this is opening a can of worms? Every time we talk about charter change, the reality is nothing in the rules will bar any congressman or any legislator from saying, hey, wait, I have another bright idea.
And what about if you vote 3/4? Who's to stop the 3/4 vote? on something that's not related to economic provision. So, in the same way that you're saying there's nothing in the Constitution that actually provides for a constituent assembly as a phrase. I mean, it's very clear there that a 3/4 vote is enough to actually amend the Constitution. So what's to stop you and your colleagues in Congress to actually
But
vote
first-
3/4 in favor of political amendments as well?
Well, unang-una, Lucy, yung pagdududa, andyan na yan. In fact, that was the argument that was used 18 years ago. And until now, yun pa rin yung argumento, kaya hindi ito napapasa. Time and time again, when we propose amendment to the restrictive economic provision, the critics will always say, ay nako, pampolitika lang yan. Ay nako, term extension yan. But if you look at kung ano nakasalang sa komitiba, sa constitutional amendments, it speaks of solely RBH 2, which is confined to the restrictive economic provisions. And that's also the committee report that will be approved by the committee and will be referred to the plenary. So, kung tatanungin nyo ako kung ano ang pagbobotohan, ito ho yung pagbobotohan pagdating doon sa plenary.
But sir,
Yes,
if you
sir,
don't mind, I mean, you can take out, I mean, we'll grant you that. We can take out all malice, we can take out all pagdududa ng mga tao. We're still left with a practical question. You yourself started this discussion by saying there is nothing in the rules that says we cannot do this. Isn't that how every congressman thinks? There is nothing in the rules that will stop me. Again, the word of the House leadership notwithstanding, there is nothing in the rules that will keep me to the word of the committee chairman and the House Speaker.
Well, Ravi, we just speak about measures pending before a committee and the one that will be reported out by the committee, then it should be german to the measures that was discussed and that was adopted by the committee. Di naman pwedeng na-approve natin, na-discuss natin sa komitiba yung economic restrictive provisions, tapos pagdating ng oras, pagdating ng committee report at pag-refer sa plenaryo, meron ng political provisions. So, let's, in the process, we really need to develop public trust. Yun ang issue dito, public trust and the timing. When you speak of the timing, they always counter this argument, timing. But as I have said, this is the right time to do the right thing. In fact, Rabi, when you speak of COVID response, ano yung ginawa ng Kongreso? We have Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2, which were able to have an immediate response to COVID. And the third is the budget for 2021, which was passed on time and signed by the President into law. That contains the pandemic budget to have a more robust COVID response. Ginawa ko yan ng Kongreso. Ang tanong ng ating sambayanan, titigil ba tayo sa paghanap ng solusyon sa COVID dahil ito'y nakabinbin sa Kongreso? Hindi. Because every committee has its own respective jurisdiction. Nagkataon lang, yung jurisdiction ng aking committee is to pursue those meaningful constitutional reforms that will bring about change and for the protection of the country and for the Filipino people. I have to exert all means necessary in order to exercise the power of the committee. Otherwise, I will be remiss from my duty. Now, the Committee on Health, the Committee on Appropriation, the Committee on Ways and Means, they also continue to do their work. Hindi naman sila tumigil sa kanilang mga trabaho while
Yes, sir.
we are discussing. So
Sir.
we are multitasking here.
Yes, sir. We
We
understand,
have
sir.
respective jurisdictions.
Sir, if we can go back to the process, kasi in the end, it does boil down to the process. Let me put it this way. Is there anything in the process that could prevent any other congressman or any other member of a constituent assembly from proposing any other amendment that he wants in the plenary? And as we said nga, there is no process naman talaga in the Constitution. It's all blank in the Constitution, and I suppose you as Congress, as a constituent assembly, you are making it up as you go along, based on what you think should be done. So is there anything in this process that would stop any other amendment aside from what you have in mind right now?
So, ang gustong sabihin, ang tanong nyo, kung in the process of the period of amendments, may sumingit na term extension or term limits or political provision. Ang tanong, pwede po. Pero ang sagot ko, and I hold the word of the Speaker, that anyone who insert the said provisions, political provisions, will not be supported. And I agree with the Speaker because I think he has the support of the supermajority and that will be taken down immediately.
But it can be subjected to a vote, Congressman. Pwede
Yes.
can be subject to a vote.
Yes.
So it's possible na
All proposals, Ma'am Ami, will be subjected to 3/4 votes of all members of Congress. And that remains a proposal. At the end of the day, if it is not ratified in a plebiscite called for that purpose, it still remains a proposal. Kahit aprubahan ng House at ng Senado, kung hindi naman iratifika ng taong bayan, it remains a proposal. Amendments will only take effect upon ratification.
Congressman, I'll digress a bit Kasi sinasabi ni Senate President Soto, ang gusto ni President Duterte, i-abolish daw yung party list. I'm asking you because you represent the party list and you had the constitutional body sa House. Ano po yung masasabi niyo sa proposal na yan?
Baliho yung context. Ang context na pagkaintindi ko, sa sabi ni Senate President ay nababahala si Presidente doon sa mga party list na ginagamit ng NPA rebels or those who are supportive of the NPA rebel groups. And so I answered with, if the sole issue is many of our party list organizations who are perceived to be supporting the NPA rebels or espouse violence, the remedy is not to amend the Constitution, but the remedy lies within the Commission on Election, thereby filing a cancellation proceedings because, you know, their certificate of registration is a continuing requirement for a party list representative to sit in Congress. Once their certification is cancelled, they cease to become a party list representative. And that is simple. You need not amend the Constitution.
Pero sir, the Supreme Court ruled on that already, and the Supreme Court ruled on that based on what is written in the Constitution. Na you don't have to belong to a marginalized group, and you don't have to be, well, you don't have to be poor. To begin with, you can just have an advocacy.
I totally agree with you, Ed, that party list system is not synonymous with sectoral representation. But this is a different issue. Under Republic Act 7941, it says that if you espouse violence, if you support terrorism to bring down the present government, that is a ground for disqualification and or cancellation of your certificate of registration, a continuing requirement to sit in Congress as a party list representative. So the remedy lies with the COMELEC. You don't need to undergo the tedious process of amending the Constitution.
Okay. Maraming salamat, Congressman Alfredo Garbin. I'm sure we will have you again in the next few weeks as this story develops.
Especially if you get the process going.
Maraming salamat
sure
for joining
more
us tonight, and we will see you again.
Maraming salamat po.
Salamat, Robbie, Ed, Ami, and Lucy. Magandang gabi sa inyo lahat.
Thank you, sir. Okay, we will just pause for a break, so please stay with us.
Lord Alan Velasco, who himself authored one of the several measures filed in the House seeking to amend the 34-year-old Constitution.
Panel Chairman Apo Bicol Party List Representative Alfredo Garbin says only so-called restrictive economic provisions will be amended. Garbin says the goal is to give Congress more flexibility to enact laws in tune with the times. This would include provisions on foreign ownership, particularly in public utilities.
That's why I am very happy that this effort of the committee to push for changes in the restrictions, economic restrictions in the Constitution is very much in order.
Welcome back, the Chiefs, here on One News. We are now in the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us is former Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Ernesto Pernia. Secretary Pernia, I don't know what to call you now. Secretary, Professor Pernia, welcome back to
Dr.
the Chiefs.
Pernia.
Dr. Pernia.
Yes.
Hi, Dr. Pernia.
Good evening.
Thank you for welcoming me after having been exiled from the, from the cabinet. Recent exile.
Okay. Well, Dr. Pernia, we'll let you speak on behalf of economic experts being consulted by Congress, because over the past days, as Chacha becomes controversial yet again, the proponents for charter change seem to always be invoking na, hindi, sabi ng economics professor, now is the best time. Sabi ng economics professor, sabi ng economic expert, it is always the best time to talk about changing the Constitution. What exactly did you convey, and is there anything to qualify there in the context of all the other things that the country is facing? COVID, election season, and so on.
Well, actually, good evening, everyone. Ami, Luchi, and Robbie, and
Ed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you for having me tonight. Okay. Actually, I started by saying that having been in NEDA, my mindset has been anticipatory and forward planning. You know, if you want to do things, you better prepare, anticipate na ngayon, and make forward plans. Hindi kasi pwedeng na we will begin to I'm innocently assuming that there's going to be no straying into political provisions of the Constitution. That it will be purely, and it's airtight, that there's going to be no straying away from that. And so I said we cannot wait for the new normal when we are already in the new normal, or even nearing the new normal. We're still far from it, but I think it takes a long time to plan and to prepare executing the plan, and also to get results.
Okay, why can't we wait? What do we stand to lose by waiting until after, the new normal or the old normal is back?
Yeah. Okay. When investors or when the international investment community sees that we are doing something already this early, let's say you're saying this, it's too early, this early about the restrictive provisions, economic provisions in the Constitution, then that already signals favorably to the investors. They're doing something. And so, they're also going to look forward to the time that when these provisions are going to be effective in terms of getting implemented on the ground.
But on the other hand, Mr. Pernia, the PCCI for one and the Makati District Club, they've issued statements expressing concern about the timing.
I disagree.
Have you been meeting with the business group about this?
No.
Can you get their sense?
I went there this morning. I joined the hearing this morning, completely devoid of influence and whatever people have been saying regarding the timing. yeah, I know that it was timing is being criticized, that we should be focusing on the pandemic, but well, we should be focusing on the pandemic and also the vaccine, and that's being done. And I hope, in fact, we should have anticipated and forward planned for that already last year, maybe middle of last year. But we were not successful in doing that because the ball was dropped by someone sometime. So that is why we're having a problem now of getting. We could already have gotten vaccines in January if we had anticipated and really prepared to get to sign the agreements and all that in early in the middle of 2020. But we waited. We just began to be serious about the vaccines. I think November or December, and so we're going to wait until the third quarter of this year for the vaccines, except maybe this Sinovac or Sinovac that may be coming a bit earlier. But
Yes, sir.
not too many are excited about the Sinovac.
Yes, sir. But sir, there
AMI are going to be want to be injected with the Sinovac vaccine.
No.
Yes, sir. But sir, there are those who argue that there are other ways of loosening the restrictions on the economy, like for example the Public Service Act, as well as the Land Use Act, among other things. So there are proponents who say that if there is some hesitation as to amending the Constitution right now, there are other ways of going about loosening the restrictions without having to tinker at this particular point with the Constitution.
That's true. In fact, we were hoping when I was still in NEDA that the trio of the Public Service Act, the Foreign Investment Act, and the Retail Trade Liberalization Act would be passed already. But it has been languishing. I don't know for what reason. What is languishing? And maybe. It's not. You are going to liberalize those trio of economic provisions, but they may not really be enough in terms of attracting, because it's a partial liberalization of the Foreign Investment Act, the Public Sector Act, and then the Retail Trade.
Investment Act, yes.
That's right, sir. Can you give us concrete examples of how foreign ownership can actually serve to propel us faster into a developed state, if that is what we want to achieve, or at least in a very much more stable economic state? How is that better than working on these or pushing these bills and resurrecting them? How is that better?
Yeah, well, if you it's just look around our ASEAN neighbors. All of them have very, hardly any restrictions on foreign participation in areas and activities, economic areas and activities in their economies. Vietnam. The really interesting case is Vietnam, erstwhile a communist country, centrally planned economy. So Vietnam is a latecomer, but it is the best performing economy now in ASEAN. It is the only economy in Asia that was able to grow 1.2%, positive 1.2%, while all other economies in Asia have contracted, including the Philippines, of course, one of the largest contraction. So Vietnam is 100%, virtually 100% open to foreign participation in areas and activities.
Yeah, but
affecting the economy. Yes,
Professor, if you don't mind, I wanna step in before you complete that leap, because there is that leap. No, but nobody. I mean, yes, they have a totally different foreign ownership regime, But that's not the only thing that allowed Vietnam to be an outlier in economic performance in 2020. There's this little thing that Vietnam dodged the COVID bullet from everybody else. There are other factors like ease of doing business that a lot of people are saying, why don't we invest and keep improving ease of doing business? I just want to be sure that you're not prefacing this as saying that it was foreign ownership that allowed Vietnam to emerge from 2020 unscathed.
No, don't mistake me. I don't think allowing foreign participation in economic areas and activities of the country, it's not a panacea, definitely. There are many other things we need to do. We need a sense of urgency, a culture of urgency. We seem to be taking it easy, you know. Mañana, pwede na yon, bukas na lang. You know, in other Asian countries, if you visit them, you know, the sense of urgency, you can feel it. That's why they get things done very fast. And that's why they're growing. They have been overtaking us. Malaysia in the early 1980s, Thailand in the early 1990s, Indonesia also passed us in 2010. Vietnam is soon going to be seeing the Philippines in its rear view mirror biting dust.
Yeah,
because Vietnam is going to overtake us very soon too.
But Professor, if you
so
don't mind,
you're saying
I'll
that foreign ownership
when it comes to charter change, it's not
Not because of
necessarily
foreign ownership only.
Yeah, when it comes to charter change, it's not necessarily just mañana or pwede na yan that's holding us back. Honestly,
right.
what the big thing is that people don't trust our congressmen. People don't trust our legislators. You
That's
yourself
another
said,
thing.
you prefaced our discussion by saying that, look, I went into it innocently. Let's say you were very gracious in taking our congressional leaders' word at it, that it is just economic provisions. But let's allow you some cynicism, as we know you are capable of some cynicism as well. Let's say when it comes to federalism, for example, for which you get some credit for
and flack.
and some flack. But what is the risk? What is the risk, sir, if the graciousness that you allowed, which is a very big premise here, does not come to pass? And the reality is somebody might broach federalism again. Somebody might broach term extension
or term limit.
And so, what are the risks on the other side?
You know, we are also a country. We are a low trust society. Actually, very low trust tayo talaga.
But it's not baseless, huh?
That is another thing. That is another thing that we need to work on. Why can't we be more trustful of people? Well, of course, first of all, we need to be trusting in our government and you know, in businessmen and the private sector. But so what I'm saying is there are many things, really. I agree with you. It's a confluence of so many things, factors that are holding us back. So that is holding us back. So I agree. I think foreign direct investment is not going to be the silver bullet that will propel us to higher income country. It is many things. Ease of doing business, infrastructure, cost of power, cost of labor. You know, our labor laws are rather quite deterring. Tend to deter investors because you know they cannot hire casual labor or worker labor that is project related only, so temporary workers. You know, they're just, you know, we have so many constraints.
Yes, sir.
I agree.
But sir, those
That's why
proposals that you
I gave
mentioned,
up. I gave up.
those proposals that you mentioned, those only take a bill to pass through Congress, which would be relatively easy under a supermajority, versus a constitutional amendment that we are talking about right now, which could be potentially politically explosive and would take much longer because any ratification would take place mid next year pa. So you're looking at a lengthy process which is very fraught with danger versus basically laws that can be passed by Congress anytime.
Yeah, there's also the argument that these dynastic politicians, they are not really interested in developing the economy or developing the economy of the province or the municipality, because when you have a dynastic, you're a dynastic politician, then you already pre-own the
Yes, sir.
voters.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's no need. So there's even no need to
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That's why there's low trust.
That's right. So
Kaya nga, sir, I think we go back to the question of, okay, we have no argument that some of these economic provisions are restrictive,
Yes, yes.
and that a bit of liberalizing in terms of
Would do
foreign
us good.
ownership will really do us a lot of good. But we go back to the question of, should we do it now? Is it imperative that we do it now? And if so, why? Why?
So what else can Congress do about the COVID and vaccines? I mean, it's now a matter of implementation by the executive. Legislation, they've passed the Bayanihan 1, Bayanihan 2.
Create.
So
They want create.
create.
They want the create law.
While that create is something that my colleagues in UP and other economists in other universities, Ateneo, UP Los Baños, and LaSalle, we don't think create is a good stimulus.
Yeah.
Well, but the administration is pushing for it. But anyway, Dr. Pernia,
I don't know. Because so okay, let's not get waylaid by that.
Yeah. Well, while you've been in government for through several administrations, what chances do you think this latest Chacha has of getting done?
Yeah,
Do you think matutuloy siya?
my condition when I accepted to join the meeting, I was asked first if I was in favor of the
CONAS.
at the restrictions, economic restrictions, removing them through Chacha. I said, okay, I agree, but there has to be an airtight proviso that there will be no straying into political provisions or self-serving
Yes, sir.
legislation. So that's what I said.
Sir, were you satisfied? Were you satisfied with their guarantee? Because they gave us a guarantee a while ago again.
The House leadership's word is
their
the
word
guarantee.
now is their guarantee. Although,
well-
at the same time, they also said kanina na, but in the end, when it gets to the plenary, we can't do anything if somebody makes a proposal.
That's right.
Or if they vote
And if they get a 3/4,
Sinabi ba yung
Yes, sir. We just had
they said
Congressman
if they
Garbin
get a
before you.
3/4, of course, it will have to be respected.
Well, that is something else, So that I would oppose, if that is the case.
Okay.
Yeah.
And whenever Dr. Pernia opposes something, that's a fatal. No, but Professor, going back to Ed's question, wouldn't it therefore be a more efficient and more practical use of Congress' remaining time to focus on the things that they can legislate within
Immediately,
Congress,
pa.
without
Immediately.
having to change the Constitution? Ease of doing business, unleashing e-commerce for the new normal.
Fixing labor
Infrastructure
laws.
is getting some momentum. Shouldn't we focus there? You talked about
Anti-dynasty.
labor issues and so on. Yeah, even the anti-dynasty bill. I mean, fat chance of that as well. But even that does not need an opening of the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution empowers and tells Congress to enact an anti-dynasty bill. Isn't it more efficient use of the remaining time of Congress to focus on these things where there is also, on top of all of that, no risk of these things that you yourself are afraid of?
To be fair to the lower house of Congress, they have already passed the trio, PSA, Public Service Act,
Yes, sir.
Foreign Investment Act and the Retail Trade Liberalization Act. They've already passed that. It's already with the Senate. It's the Senate that has not attended to it so far. So that is. So in other words, so on the lower house side, that's why they're going into these restrictive provisions of the Constitution, because they've already done that part that you are talking about.
Dr. Pernia, what don't you like about CREATE?
Yeah, kasi ang CREATE is more supply stimulus. What we need is a demand stimulus. Keynesian economics, says that during when the economy is in crisis, like now, like the recession in the 1935 or something, and 1945, Keynesian's demand stimulus, measure became popular because that really got the economy, the U.S. economy, and the Western economies out of the recession. It's demand kasi ngayon if you do supply stimulus,
Walang pera tao.
ha?
Walang pera tao.
The problem is
Bibili kasi wala naman pera.
there has to be demand muna. Demand importante before supply. Kasi yung monetarist economists sa Chicago School, as opposed to the Keynesian school in Cambridge and Harvard and is demands Keynesian sila sa Chicago, yung supply creates its own demand. Supply side economics ang tawag dyan. So it's more a monetarist kind of policy than the Keynesian thing. And the thing is, you reduce the taxes on large corporations, and because they know there's so much uncertainty yet in terms of business activity and buying, they will not use that money to expand or to expand their activities and increase supply, but they would probably just put it on a reserve
Savings,
reserve, so that
Yes.
you will have something when the uncertainties are
Arise.
are driven away.
Okay.
Okay, well, we'll have to brush up on our Econ 101 there in order to appreciate what
Econ
Dr.
11 yun,
Pernia is
Econ
saying.
11.
But
But at least we got it. At least we got it right. Your title, Professor. Maraming salamat po.
But what economists in UP and Ateneo and UP Los Baños and LaSalle, what we favor is the Arise. Arise is better because it's a demand-driven stimulus. Putting money in the hands of
pockets of
unemployed workers and trying to revive these small and medium enterprises, which supply goods that are in demand.
Yes, sir.
all right.
Okay.
Okay.
Dr. Ernesto Pernia. Yes, sir. Former Economic Planning Secretary. Sir, always a pleasure to have you with us. We'd like to have you again.
Salamat, sir.
Maraming salamat po.
Na-miss kayo namin eh.
Nako, i-headline na naman kayo ni Ami.
I'm sorry. Ang problema dyan na, Ami, by the way, is I'll be clashing with Dominguez if you put that.
Hindi namin kayo pag-fly.
Baby.
Thank you, sir. Ingat po. We will see you again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Don't
you, sir.
clash, Ami, eh?
No, we won't. Konti lang.
Good night, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you.
And that will be all for this midweek edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Ed Lingao.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay and we are One News.